Happy Thursday, everybody. Sam Shapiro back here with more of your Heat latest on FanArc. Don't forget to subscribe for great daily content, all pertaining to the Miami Heat, right here Monday through Friday. And of course, drop a like on this video. Jahmir Young, now amongst the plethora guards Miami is kind of, auditioning to see who is more deserving of a two-way contract coming up for this regular season now. As the guard prospect was agreed to a deal with Miami yesterday. And quite honestly, I go back and forth about this because don't get me wrong, this guard's another stud. Obviously was balling out in the G League last year, averaging around 21 points per game with the Windy City Bulls across 43 games, roughly playing about 35 minutes in that contest as well. And then also adding nearly 2 steals a game to go with that too. So the two-way game from this guard, obviously very exciting to see. Also blowing out the the game wasn't a blowout, but he dropped nearly 40 points against the Milwaukee Bucks in Vegas this past summer league on 13 of 18 shooting, 7 of 8 from 3 in that contest. So the guy's definitely another sharp shooting guard Miami's going to be looking at to hopefully, maybe develop into another science experiment off the bench as Miami has kind of been able to do, especially over the last 5 seasons particularly. But the one thing that's really concerning to me is that why are we looking to bring in another guard in this form? We have, plenty of other guards that were kind of auditioning for a certain role. I believe I was talking about Ethan Thompson earlier this week. And, quite honestly, with the development of guys like Pela Larson also at the forefront and now Yaku Chones, acquiring him in the draft, we're seeming a little bit very guard heavy, and because of the lack of what we're going to, potentially get for Terry Rozier, which I am going to get later into in this show. At this point, it seems like the only thing that Miami is able to really acquire in terms of talent that really might be able to stick around and contribute is backcourt talent. And we're kind of short on some big men, and we really need to be, I think, investing in players like Jahmir Young, more that would contribute towards the front court. So I'm not saying, going for a guy like Jahmir Young is a bad idea, because like I just said, absolute proven sharpshooter, was a clean-cut scorer in the G League this past year. I mean, it's honest, in my opinion, it's kind of the Bulls' loss for waiving him, just because the Bulls don't, I feel like, have a whole lot to really build around right now, and I think that's definitely a guard that would contribute to their roster, which I think needs a lot more work than Miami does in the grand scheme of things. But I mean, hey, if he ends up being another sharpshooter for Miami and he is more of deserving that two-way deal, and he proves that he can take the NBA floor and not really have to split more of those games in the G League this upcoming season, then I think Jahmir Young could be an interesting guy to look at, especially as training camp approaches, now signing that deal with Miami. And drop in the comments if you think Jahmir Young could be a good guy to highly consider for not just a two-way contract, but that could hopefully contribute in Miami's rotation going forward as the season progresses, and could ultimately develop into, not just a key player in the rotation, but another sharpshooter like we've seen, Duncan Robinson maybe become over the course of just the couple of seasons he spent in the 305. But now moving over to another issue pertaining to the Miami Heat. What is going, I've got some more developments now going on with the Miami Heat heist that took place earlier this month, where an ex-security officer who worked with the Miami Heat was basically accused of stealing hundreds and thousands of dollars worth of Miami Heat memorabilia. So on Tuesday, August 19th, former Miami Heat security officer Marcos Thomas Perez pleaded guilty to those federal charges of transporting and transferring stolen goods in interstate commerce. Perez admittedly stealing over 400 game-worn jerseys and memorabilia from the Heat's secured equipment room at the Casillas Center between 2016 and 2025. Those details now confirmed, including a LeBron James NBA Finals jersey that he eventually sold for $100,000 and that later fetched $3.7 million at auction. So his sentencing is now scheduled for Halloween of this year, and he faces up to 10 years in prison, 3 of those years of being supervised release, and then a $250,000 fine. So I'm glad this is becoming a little bit more than just a slap on the wrist for for the ex-security personnel for Miami. It's just really unfortunate that somebody in the organization would go out of their way to spend really the last almost decade stealing hundreds of, I mean, now it makes sense as to why he was able to get hundreds of jerseys out of there, because he kind of did it over the course of, really a decade instead of when initially the news broke. I felt like it was kind of portrayed as if it was over the course of a year or a couple months or whatnot, but they definitely said hundreds of game-worn jerseys were stolen. And now that we kind of have more of a timeline on how that happened, it's just it's really unfortunate to see something like this take place within the organization. So glad he is going to be facing some pretty serious consequences, and hopefully nothing like this ever happens again, especially within the Miami Heat organization going forward. Just unfortunately, just some bad news, but glad that he is, being held accountable instead of kind of just getting a slap on the wrist and ultimately kind of getting to walk away without any without having to face real circumstances for doing something to that magnitude. Moving over to something another topic that we've, really been talking about, especially over the last week, we're going to revisit what's going on with Terry Rozier. And now I'm starting to see articles and takes online. Is Miami just going to straight up waive Terry Rozier before the start of the regular season? I definitely think now that Miami is getting desperate, saying that, I know I was talking yesterday about how, or over the course of the week that, in so many different facets, Miami slowly becoming more and more desperate to really get a trade for him or some sort of deal for him. But now at this point, it doesn't even seem like Miami might be able to get trade capital for him. I mean, if you're going to trade Highsmith and get some draft capital, you could definitely do that. But I think they're wanting a little bit more for Rozier just because of what they initially got him for, what the role kind of was for him in addition to being able to contribute to, this Heat roster. But I think now it's going to become, if Miami really just doesn't want to pay him, are they going to ultimately waive him and just let him walk? I definitely think if they're trying to free up that money just to guarantee bringing in somebody else, I mean, you have to ultimately make it worth it if you're going to, just let him walk for pretty much, freeing up that salary, freeing up the $25 million they're going to have to pay him. But I think that there is value to be gotten still from Rozier. I definitely think there are a lot of teams that could really utilize, maybe picking up a player like Rozier, but nobody probably wants to pay $25 million for a point guard that's going to average nearly 10 points a game when just a few seasons ago he was averaging nearly 20 and his nickname had Scary in it, being Scary Terry, obviously. But drop in the comments if you think Miami's ultimately going to decide to waive Terry Rozier if they can't strike a deal before the tip-off of the regular season. I definitely think it's becoming a little bit more possible than I had initially thought, over the course of the last 2 weeks. I think it would ultimately be a little bit of a waste if Miami decided to waive him, just because I don't think he's that bad, but he's certainly not the player he was in Charlotte, which I've, mentioned time and time again, especially this week. And I just think that Miami could get some good value out of a point guard that still has some potential to, go to another franchise and return to playing at the level he was before. Unfortunately, that glass slipper fit he was probably looking for just not working out really in Miami right now. And unfortunately, he's not the first player that's kind of seen a scenario like this that has come in playing on a high level from another team and it hasn't really worked out. But I don't think trading him for some sort of value at this point is all lost completely. And if they can even get like 3 or 4 draft picks out of him at this point, that might be that honestly might be worth it more than waiving him. I just think the only benefit in, if you decide to drop him and the only benefit you're going to get out of it is losing that money you have to pay him, then I don't really think it's worth it. I think it's worth holding on to him towards the deadline to see if you can maybe strike gold later in the season, and then hopefully you're only then you're at least getting what's remaining on his contract off your plate, and you're it's closer to probably $13-12 million instead of, and then you're still shaving 10, 12 million or 12 to 14 million dollars off if you decide to deal him towards the deadline, or maybe even less money than that. But drop in the comments what you think Miami's going to do, if they're hopefully going to get some decent value out of him before the tip-off of the regular season. If they can't, just decide to straight up waive him, or if they might try to hang on to him until the deadline and see if they can strike gold there. Now, moving over to my final topic of the day, specifically 2K26 ratings are now pretty public, and they're out in the open. And Harrow and Adebayo both being rated within the top 50 players in the game for this upcoming season. And that obviously is just an exciting thing to see. Both players not, kind of just falling slightly under the 90-point mark, or the 90 overall, mark in the grand scheme of things. But I just think it's very interesting to see Bam Adebayo ranked within the top 30 to 21 players. And then, of course, Tyler Harrow within the 50 to 41 ranked players. Harrow ranking at 42, the only one being Thompson on the Houston Rockets, Ahmed Thompson. And, I don't necessarily think this is like the most fair rating in the world, just because offensively Tyler Harrow is an absolute bucket. Don't get me wrong, Thompson totally up and coming, is going to totally be a future all-star in this league. Just I think he's an athletic freak of nature, to be completely honest with you. And I think he's barely scratching the surface and is going to be such a focal piece for Houston going forward. But I wouldn't say that he's just quite better than Tyler Harrow just yet. Some of the other players, they had Harrow rated over Tyrese Maxey, Jamal Murray, Zach LaVine, De'Aaron Fox, Austin Reeves, and DeMar DeRozan, which is very nice to see. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know. I think that Jamal Murray being within kind of the same ballpark is a very interesting take. I feel like both players get kind of the overrated coin or the overrated label tossed on them quite a bit. But it's nice to see Harrow sitting at 42. And then I want to talk about Bam sitting at 30 overall in the game at 88. Just to kind of see him in the same conversation as James Harden, but then a player like Pascal Siakam being rated higher than him by 1 point. I mean, don't get me wrong, Siakam was on a championship team last year, and the way he played in that, especially in that playoff run, was like 90% of the reason why Indiana was able to go as far as they were, or was part of the 90% reason why. With him, Halliburton, and Miles Turner, I feel like having those core three really set the strong foundation for the rest of their rotation to kind of go off, allowing guys like McConnell to kind of go on some runs, especially in the third quarter. But to say Siakam, I think, is a better player than Bam Adebayo, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I like that, 2K kind of rating them very close together because they're comparable players and they're both very good in the sense that they're big guys that are agile, that can play both sides of the ball very well. But I wouldn't say, I wouldn't necessarily say Siakam is, it's 1 overall. It's nothing to cry about, but I don't know. Maybe I'm a little biased. Drop in the comments if you think Bam got snubbed, having Siakam, Evan Mobley, and Banchero being rated higher than him. But I don't know. I think the two-way game from Bam is just, there are not a lot of centers that play like him in the NBA, and I'm glad that it got him 30th, like the 30th ranked. He's ranked the 30th player in 2K26 right now, but I don't know. Some of those names I wouldn't necessarily put him over, especially Jared Jackson Jr. I don't agree with that at all. And but yeah, no, I wouldn't say it's an absolutely crazy list, and it's very nice to see Harrow and Adebayo both being ranked within the top 50 players of the game so far. That's going to do it for today's episode of your Heat Latest here on FanArc. Once again, don't forget to like this video and, of course, subscribe to our channel. Thanks again so much for joining us on this wonderful Thursday. I'm Sam Shapiro. Have a good one.